One single Hindu ashram, not one Shankaracharya, not one guru, established a college to teach science, to study science.
The Hindu believers and sages worship, they go up to Mount Kailash.
Indian religiosity is seeking renunciation.
Raja of Travancore was not interested in the science.
India is not an island.
Pretty much doctors, medical doctors.
Thank you for watching this video. I have the great honor today to introduce to you my friend Mr. Prasanth David, who trained as an engineer and has served as a businessman in the Silicon Valley in California, and is now coordinating a very special research, out of which came my first book on the Bible's impact in creating modern India. So he has been coordinating this research project, and there are 3 or 4 more volumes to come. Today, I will be interviewing Mr. David about how the Bible brought modern science to India. So thank you for joining us, coming all this distance, and spending your summer vacation with us.
Thank you, Dr. Vishal, and thank you.
Yes. So we, from Indian immigrants, we take great pride in the wonderful things that Indian scientists, engineers are doing in all over the world, running the Silicon Valley, as they say, and also very important technology companies are being run by India. The interesting thing is that all of this success, contemporary success of Indians in this sphere of science and technology, began with the Bible. I will do some videos on how the Bible is the source book of science, why modern science was born in Europe because of the Bible. But today what we're talking about is that how the Bible brought modern science to India. So that's the focus for this interview, and I will summarize the role that the prophets of modernization of India, Charles Grant, the Indian reformer Raja Mohan Roy, Lord Macaulay, who wrote the Minute on Education, what role they played. We'll discuss that a little later. But I'd like to begin by asking Mr. David the question about the first aspects of modern science that came with Europeans to India, which include navigation, geography, astronomy, because the British and Portuguese, Spanish, Danish, they couldn't have come to India without astronomy, without navigation, and without their passion for surveys. So could you illustrate from Indian history how the Bible brought these elements, the fundamental elements? Then we will go to other subjects of botany, forestry, etc.
Thank you, Dr. Vishal. Yes, today, as we look back at more than 300 years of colonialism, British colonialism, that's what people think brought science and technology to India. But in reality, it reached much earlier. So I'll be referring to the book Science and the British Empire by Rajesh Kochar. So he was a professor in Delhi, and he actually won the 2014 Indira Gandhi Prize for Popularization of Science, and he's written many books on this topic of, particularly the colonial history. And this particular book, Science and the British Empire, is a wonderful, voluminous survey of historical survey of how science and technology arrived in India, particularly when we think of how Portuguese and the Dutch, the Danish, and finally the British arrived in India, and they had to travel 6 months in very severe conditions. Unlike today, we have marine GPS and all kinds of navigation equipments on satellites and everything. But at that time, it was just a wind-powered sailboat, right? And people had scurvy and all kinds of diseases. So I think the first, I think the beginning of the successful voyages to British, particularly the British voyage to India, was because of the discovery or the invention of the marine chronometer, which helped in the exact determination of exact longitude, because that's very critical in marine navigation. And it was triggered by the death of 2,000 sailors in Sicily, British sailors in Sicily. So the British government instituted a board of longitude, and eventually that resulted in some individual winning a prize for this discovery of, or rather the invention of the marine chronometer. So the important steps include what is known as the sextant. It's an instrument also for navigation. So some of these tools which were developed, and of course the telescope, which was invented by this, first recorded invention of telescope is by Hans Lippershey, a Dutchman. So in the 1500s. So tracing, it was basically the invention of these instruments of navigation which brought this Western colonial powers to India for trading. Initially that came for trading, and so we have this, so when that is one point. But before that, the Jesuits, some of these Jesuits were particularly from France and Italy, and they came to India very early in the 1500s and 1600s, and they discovered a land which was completely devoid of any maps or directions, and this instilled in them a desire to survey the land, and particularly just simple directions, north, south, west, east, and so on. And this survey, they published some of the survey in books, and in Latin and French. Interestingly, in Latin and French, which is purely like a European language, not even British. Not even this English. So and they were published in, and they were sent back to their headquarters. These maps and voluminous surveys were sent, but they were all surveys in different areas of India, like for example Agra, or say places near Rajasthan or Gujarat, or some of these places, and maybe some in the south. So all these over 100-200 years, these volumes were sent to there, and then this British, I think that at that time although the British and the Dutch and the French were all enemies, and they were all trying to trade with India, and so there was, but they did share their work. So the British got hold of that those surveys and translated into English. Eventually, this became the East India Company. When it was established in India, they wanted to survey the land, so they established I think one of the main names is Major James Rennell, and he was one of the first major surveyors in 1767. So that was the beginning of the survey of India. So they used that maps which were given by the Jesuits.
So the Survey of India is the very first scientific institution in India. Before that, no Hindu king, no Mughal emperor, no Muslim ruler or Sikh ruler had established a scientific institution, and this continues till today. And they were surveying the land. You mentioned places such as Agra, but actually the Everest, discovery of Everest, or the magnetic force in Trivandrum. So this was all being surveyed. So surveying India, which finally culminates in our national anthem in Rabindranath Tagore, 1911, singing Jana Gana Mana Adhinayak Jai Ho, and he defines India's borders as Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maratha, Dravida, Utkal, Banga, Vindhya, Himachal. So until 1911, no Hindu scripture, no Vedas, no Upanishads, no Puranas, no epics have defined India's geography. So
what about Jambudvipa? There was this.
There is reference.
Bharata.
Yeah, there is reference to Jambudvipa, and this was proposed during the Constituent Assembly after independence in 1948, that India should be called Jambudvipa because there is reference to it. But most scholars think that because India is not a dweep means an island.
Yes.
India is not an island, so that Jambudvip probably refers to one of the Indonesian's islands where Indian had been trading in the past,
like Chola Empire. Or
yes.
Some of those.
So, but there is no definition or no boundary of what is India, and this, for the first time, which we accepted Tagore's poem Jana Gana Man, which was the culmination. So 1767 is when the first scientific institution is established in India. It is preceded by a number of other trigonometrical survey and coal committee, coal survey, a number of others which you can explain better. But we'll come to the question of why are the British surveying India. Portuguese Jesuits before that, and Jesuits were not all Portuguese, many of them were Italian, French. They are surveying India. Why aren't the rishis and munis and Indian sages who are wandering around Char Dham, the four
and they established a number of
centers.
Shrines, right? Shankaracharya, for example, established a number of shrines all over the country.
Yes, but why didn't they take an interest in geography and survey? So you've described two things. One, they are studying the oceans because that makes it possible to chart a sea route to India. But in order to map the sea route to India, they have to know the stars. So that's where you brought the telescope. So they are studying astronomy. We have a lot of study of astrology, but astronomy as a science is what allows these European powers to come and trade here.
Because we have this command in the first very first chapters of Genesis, right? It is to go out and have dominion over the earth, right? So I think that is where these European powers from the Bible gets these kind of ideas to go out and have this ship and navigate the oceans and use the stars, right? So
that's very true. So as one begins to read the Bible, right there in the beginning chapters in Genesis, that Adam and Eve are created, they are put in a garden, and it defines the 4 rivers that flow through the garden, and the gold, the special things that are there in that massive garden. So the interest in geography, God is saying, you fill the earth, establish your dominion over it, and you can only do that if you know it, if you understand it. But then in chapter 12 in Genesis, when God calls Abraham, that you walk with me, you follow me, and I will give you this land, he begins to specify the geography of Israel, which is there today. And then it continues until, say, book of Joshua, from Joshua chapter 14, the detailed geography of Canaan, promised land, Israel, that this tribe will have this borders and that tribe will have this boundary. So the provinces, 12 provinces are specified. So the Bible is a book which is deeply interested in geography, because the Bible sees this earth as God's creation, given to his children to manage, to govern, and they have to know what they're governing. But Hinduism saw the earth creation as Maya, as illusion. So our learned gurus, they didn't lack intelligence, but they lacked a worldview, a theology, a philosophy, and they were meditating to escape from creation. That this is an illusion, and this is Maya, and I have to be delivered from Maya.
Or of course, it could be suffering also, right? Because all of life is suffering, right? So
life is suffering, and the only way to end suffering is to escape life itself, not just the world, but life itself. Yes, you're right. So, who are some of the players? We'll come back to navigation. It begins with Columbus and Vasco da Gama.
Right.
But in India, who is bringing these?
So the survey of India eventually, so it began as there was the final survey of India as we know it today is only in the 1870s or something, 78, I believe. But before that, from the 1767 onwards, we have this post of surveyor of India, surveyor of, for example, surveyor of Calcutta, or surveyor of Bombay, or surveyor of, so different parts of India as they came under British rule or the East India Company. It was primarily for a profit motive. It was and also for military purposes, because so the book Science and the British Empire clearly says that the motive was not exactly to educate people, but that comes later on. So and they start and eventually, as more and more kingdoms come under the British, for example, the Tipu Sultan, fall of Tipu Sultan is in 1800. So 1799, the Battle of Srirangapatnam, and 1800, the British Mysore comes under British people. So they start this. That was, I believe, the point where they introduced something called the trigonometrical survey. So they start to because there's a lot of mountains, Western Ghats, and the Eastern Ghats and Aravalli Seas, and so you have to have some kind of a height, not just directions, right? So that is when what is called trigonometry. So trigonometrical survey starts, and eventually the main one of the key players is a well-known person called George Everest. So George Everest is a famous. He actually devised a mathematical system through which the entire India is the current map of India is completely devised by George Everest, and he is actually the son of a pastor in England. His lineage goes back. Probably his grandfather was a pastor. So he and of course this George Boole, this famous computer science, father of computer science, is all in the same family tree. So so this George Everest devices, and he's he's like the person, the quote unquote which culminates the the survey of India, and he is within his successor interestingly finds the tallest mountain in the world in India, right? And decides to name it Mount Everest in honor of George Everest. And it is interesting that this Indian culture or Hindu believers and sages worship. They go up to Mount Kailash and all these places for tabas. For tabas, right? So they are fond of high altitudes. Mansarovar, they are fond of high altitudes, but none of them have found out that the world's tallest mountain is right in the backyard, right?
Well, it's not easy to go for a hike on Mount Everest,
right?
Or Darshan,
right? So this is very interesting that eventually the entire bits and pieces, of surveys here and there, starting right from the Jesuits all the way, and fall into place.
The coal survey, what's the role for that?
So the coal survey is actually
Coal committee.
The coal committee is actually founded because England already had by the time develops. It's come under the steam engines. The Industrial Revolution is kicking off in England, right? And they are so coal is a high calorific fuel. And it is very because the density of coal is very high. So per kilogram, right, the calorific value is very high, right? So those kind of things, the English discover that, and they are looking for coal, and some of them find some strains of coal in North India, in places of North India, Bengal, and eventually they try to. The government sets up what is known as the Coal Committee, which eventually morphs into the Geological Survey of India, or the Geological Survey of India, because coal is so as we look at that, because the East India Company is primarily involved in profit making, right? So they are interested in finding out what is useful for them, right?
So let's talk a little bit about profit making. Is making profit, having that as your motivation, that you are starting an East India Company, not to colonize India, but to make profit in India, is that a biblical attitude?
Well, why not? Why not, right? Because I think it resulted in, so let us see it this way, right? Indians were using cow dung and firewood as fuel, right? And it was today when we look at India is the fourth it gets its 75% of energy from coal, right? Because firewood and cow dung is not calorific enough, right? So India's energy this is the largest population in the world, and the energy 75% of energy needs are met by coal. So who discovered that coal, right? Because this East India Company came here and set up. Eventually, they set up the railway network in India, right? So so exploring and finding India's coal was critical, not just for their profit, but for the further development
energy production
of the country, right?
Of the country,
of going forward. So right.
So now this is, of course, Jesus sees that as true spirituality. That if God has given you 5 talents, to multiply that, make it 10 talents, you probably have to produce 20 talents,
Right.
use 10 of them, and return the 10 to the owners. You take 10 million from the bank, you have to return 10 million
Right,
with interest, but you have to earn enough to live and to pay everybody who's working with you. So if God has given you 1 talent, to make it 10, that's, in Jesus's teaching, that's true spirituality.
Yes,
being
indeed.
fruitful. You have not chosen me, I have chosen you, Jesus says, to bear fruit, to multiply. So he says, I'm the vine, you are the branches. If you abide in me, you will bear fruit. And if you are bearing fruit, you will be pruned so that you might bear much fruit.
It's more fruit, yes.
So to be economically productive, while Indian religiosity is seeking renunciation, you renounce the world, or you assign it to a special caste to make money. But you, as a spiritual person, you will not do something to make money. But multiplying what God has given you, he gives you 1 seed, you multiply it 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. That's, according to Jesus, is being good stewards. So spirituality is stewardship.
Yes.
So the East India Company was not created to colonize anybody. It was created to make money, because making money was part of Christian spirituality, biblical spirituality. God had said to Abraham that I will give you a land flowing with milk and honey, abundance. So Jesus came to give abundant life. And but that, once you create the abundance, you bless everybody.
So one particular, while still at coal, one particular thing is, like, a lot of Britishers came to India, and they were it was a tough life at that time, right? There was no telephone connection back home here you could call in.
No air conditioning.
No air conditioning. So a lot of them died of diseases and and all kinds of climate problems and diseases and weather problems. So one person which stands out is David Hiram Williams. He took up an appointment as the geological surveyor in the East India Company, and he came. So it is written that he came seeking fortune in India, but eventually what happened is he was on this expedition to discover coal, and he fell off the elephant, and he became an unfortunate martyr for coal. So trying to discover coal, you have so you have different, as we proceed, you'll also find different people who have given up their life trying to survey India. Right? So it is tough to go out in the forest and deal with wild animals and be on elephant backs. So
but this is interesting that we have been living it here for thousands of years, but our worldview, our religious system, did not inspire anyone to find an alternative to firewood and cow dung, to look for coal,
Right.
look for sources of energy,
Right.
because without energy you cannot have industry.
Right.
and you cannot have progress. So, bringing these three things together and moving on to something else, that astronomy
Yes.
was necessary for navigation, and how we already had astrology. People were studying stars and planets, and so what's the difference between study of astronomy and astrology?
So astronomy is the scientific study of all planetary bodies, including other planets and stars and Milky Way and galaxies as we know it today. But at that time, we were limited to astrology was limited to finding out the position of the stars and the planets and how it aligns with your future. So it is the worldview that planets and stars controlled, or the gods control these planets and stars, which eventually controlled you, right? So this, if your stars aligned, that's in the famous proverbial expression, right? You're good to go, right? You're you're all set for your future. But if not, you have to provide a sacrifice, or you have to find out a workaround, by appease these planets by, of course, giving money to Brahmin priests, and making sure they will do a sacrifice, and they will, or some kind of appeasement puja, and find out give you a workaround for life.
But that's very true. Jyotiba Phule, who is the first low caste social reformer in India, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, he wrote a book called Slavery, and the slave maker is the astrologer, the Hindu Pandit, but who frightens you that, oh, your child is born under such and such constellation and this position, and his future will be terrible, this, that, and the other, unless you appease these deities. So astrology turns the heavenly beings, creatures, planets, constellations, into gods and goddesses who demand bribe.
Right.
They harass you for no rhyme or reason. The child has done nothing wrong, but he or she was born in at this particular movement, astrological movement, and this is inauspicious.
Right.
So Phule points the picture of how astrology was one important means of enslaving India, and the Pandits were using it. He calls them Bhat. They were using it. But astronomy, which is a scientific study, and that's dependent on telescopes, etc., that made it possible for Europeans to make sea routes, charts, maps, to come and colonize so much of the world, Africa, Asia, South America. So what's the difference there in astrology and astronomy, and who began to teach us astronomy?
So the book, referring back to the book, he gives the beginning of astronomy in India as obviously the Britishers, the British sailors and the captains had these instruments, marine chronographs, but formally the East India Company set up the Madras Observatory in 1792. That is when they set up this observatory, and it was interestingly enough was established at Madras for promoting the knowledge of astronomy, geography and navigation in India. So this profit-making, corporate, sets up an educational initiative in the form of Madras Observatory, and eventually India gets 9 observatories, starting from Madras 1792 all the way up to Hyderabad in 1901. So this is 9 observatories are set up in many parts of India. Some of them are still there. Kodaikanal, Trivandrum are still operating, and so what happens is they start to these instruments are and they are populated by the East India Company or the Raja, the native kings, sponsor these observatories and invite British staff to maintain this. And of course, it is actually the start of not just astronomy, but it is also the start of industry. But because maintaining these telescopes and chronometers and all these require some kind of technical, mechanical expertise, and native Indians are trained and employed in this. So India gets its first batch of or cohort of trained technicians to maintain these observatories. And these observatories are and of course they get really some native Indians, like I think Chintamani Raghunatacharya, right? So he is employed in the service of the Madras Observatory, and he becomes so interested, and he starts as a low level clerk, and eventually he becomes a supervisor, and he starts promulgating the difference between astrology and astronomy, in terms of pamphlets and books. And he observes the transit of Venus in I think in 1874, and he writes several pamphlets and books and starts giving public lectures on these those various highlighting the difference between astrology and astronomy. So his British masters, right, view him as a success story of, we brought this project to India, and this here is this native who is taking this project up and doing what we exactly what we intended it to do. But unfortunately, the director of the observatory wrote that Chari delivered a number of Achari, right? So he delivered a number of public lectures where he explained to the listeners the true principles of science as opposed to the ignorant superstitions and rough predictions of the Hindu astrologers and empirics of the old school. So, but unfortunately, these lectures fall on deaf ears because the natives
at that time.
So we find that this over and over again, that this Jesuits and British colonizers bring instruments of telescopes or chronometers as gifts to Nawabs and kings, but these Nawabs and so it is accepted as earlier times it was probably tobacco or gold or some gifts, but these telescopes become accepted as a symbol of superiority, a technological superiority given by a foreigner. But unfortunately, instead of looking through it, it is looked upon, right, in a showcase.
Yes.
In a showpiece.
Well, I have published a little book on astrology, whether we are made in the image of our stars, in which I discuss, say, Jantar Mantar in Delhi.
Right.
The interesting thing is, as you said, Jesuits brought telescopes and gave gifts even to Jahangir and to the Delhi Maharaj, etc. But they were not used, and therefore they had to not only establish observatories, but begin teaching astronomy. So William Carey, who is a missionary Bible translator, he himself teaches astronomy in the Sirampur College. The Babu Neeraj Chaudhary, who became famous for writing his biography called Autobiography of an Unknown Indian. Mm-hmm. So in one of his books, I think it is Continent of Circe, he points out that the atmosphere in a police station, the corruption of the police, resembles the atmosphere of the Hindu temple. Gods and goddesses demand appeasement, that you haven't done anything wrong, but today is Saturday, so Shani Maharaj will be angry with you, and you will have an accident unless you appease. So today this god is upset with you, tomorrow that god demands appeasement from you. So before you start anything, there are gods and goddesses who are inauspicious for no rhyme or reason except that they want appeasement from you.
Right.
So this is what anyone in India who is in a position of authority, police officer,
right,
or a clerk or even a chaprasi, working for the government, they want to extract appeasement from you. So this is what Jyotiba Phule is saying, that the culture of astrology enslaves us. Culture of astronomy makes us rulers. So the Europeans are able to come here. We're not going there.
Right.
But they're able to come here. They come not to colonize, but to trade. But finally, they are forced into colonialism after the Battle of Plassey in 1757, which we won't talk today.
But the interesting thing is, it is a very useful. Astronomy is an extremely useful subject because it is super useful in predicting cyclones, tornadoes, and calamities of nature, which is a result of some kind of like some some sin, as the Bible says, right? So humans are trying to find this solution, right, through understanding magnetism, the Earth's magnetism, and for example, the Trivandrum Observatory, right? This produced John Caldecott. John Allen Brown, who was awarded the Fellow of Royal Society because of his studies on the magnetic meridian, which goes through Trivandrum, because it's close to the equator. So that gave him the Fellow of Royal Society. But the king, the Raja of Travancore, was not interested in the
science.
the science. He was more interested in what his astrologers told, and he would compare notes with the observatory and see if the stars did align again. But he was kind enough to give I think a pension of £75 to the widow when John Allen passed away. So it is very interesting that the natives interact with this new science which is coming in. And then another important thing is this 22-year-old meteorologist. I think his name, thanks to the he actually predicted. His name is Sahini, Ruchi Ram Sahini. He actually predicted the 1885 super cyclone in the Bay of Bengal. As you know, Bay of Bengal is a completely cyclone-prone area, and he gave out the alert in time, and he managed. It is written that he managed to save 10,000 people, the lives of 10,000 people.
Well, it's important for our viewers to know the difference. What's the Bible's role in this? So, in Genesis 1, the first chapter of the Bible, when it talks about the God created heaven, sun and moon to govern the day and the night, and he created all these planets and stars and galaxies, constellations, and then it goes on to say he created man to establish his dominion over the earth. And it says in verse 14 of Genesis 1 that these heavenly creation, sun, moon, stars, planets, they are signs. If they are signs in the heavens, what are they sign of? We have to study them. So Indian Maharajas who were building places such as Jantar Mantar, these were time machines, the sort of clock. You know what time it is
based
now.
On shadows, I think.
Yes, shadow. But they were not for public. They were for astrologers to advise the king which of his many queens he should sleep with today, whether he should go for a war or whether he should make peace with his enemies. So these were astrological guidance. They were not for time management. The culture of the clock There are a very powerful book by a Harvard economist, Revolution in Time. Who needed time? Do we manage our times, or do our times, astrological times, manage us?
Yeah.
That we can't start this journey today, we can't get married today, or we can't get married in this year, and we can't get into this partnership. This is, our times are ruling over us. Or are we created to rule over our time, manage our time? So this culture of astronomy and astrology, which I'll have another podcast on it, is very important for the question of whether we are going to establish our dominion and manage time, or whether our times will rule over us, whether we are going to be slaves. That's the difference. But we'll consider that next time and another time. Let's go on to the botany, forestry, agriculture. These are scientific animal husbandry, which come because of the Bible, that we are worshipping rivers and trees and animals, not just cows, but also snakes and monkeys. But the Bible brings a worldview that we are not to worship nature. We're not to worship sun, moon, stars, constellations. We're not to worship rivers and mountains and trees and monkeys and snakes, but we are to establish our dominion. So how did this scientific attitude that we should be establishing, we should know the world in which we live in order to establish our dominion over it? Would you like to?
Yeah. So I think what happened is this company came, and the East India Company came, and it started enormous project of shipbuilding. So because it needed ships to, the many ships were lost in sea, and so they started, using the lumber in India, timber in Indian forests. So eventually because the forests in Britain started to get depleted, because they used oak trees, and here when they came, they found teak, which is better than oak, because teak is much more resistant to water and things like that. So eventually they found out that this problem of depletion is going to happen, right? And so they needed they needed a calculation of how much timber is left in the forest, right? Or how much, what is the rate of growth or regrowth. So that prompted this. That is the basic, prompting, or the basic thought behind setting up the Indian Forestry Service, which is still there, which is run. The cadre of the Indian Foreign Service and IAS and the IFS, Indian Forestry Service, is still there. So it was set up by in 1864 by Brandis, and he actually is a relative of William Carey. And that is how not William Carey, he was a disciple of William Carey. This German guy, right, he comes, he has nothing to do with the British. He is, a relative of, a disciple of William Carey, and he comes and establishes the Indian Forest Service in 1864, I believe. And
the company establishes and hires him.
Right. Yes. And also, yes, that's true.
Well, the actual relation with William Carey is also intellectual, because Carey's newspaper, Friend of India, was already arguing for forestry, that we have to take care of the forests. And in Serampur, William Carey was teaching forestry and planting trees.
Right.
So the book that my wife and I wrote, Father of Modern India, William Carey, it talks about the seeds, the intellectual seeds, that if we are created as human beings to be God's children, to manage our Father's creation, we have to take care of the planet.
Right. So, as you said, so there is a background behind this is the, a number of gardens are established, and a number of people. The background even goes even back much more before that to the Tangibar mission. So the Tangibar mission and the Jesuits who start coming here. So the Tangibar mission is the first Protestant mission. It is set up in Tangibar in Tamil Nadu in 1705 by Danish Lutheran. The king, the Danish king himself sends missionaries to to India, in response to the Church of England, or similar efforts in Britain. And he sends them, and eventually, Moravians join the mission, and there's a entire history of 150, 200 years of Tangibar, and they start collecting. They start this taxonomy of, or the systematic naming of plants, and collection of species, and preservation of species, and these get sent over back to Denmark and Britain, and wherever these missionaries were allied to at different points in time. And these specimens are still found in the British Museum or in the Denmark museum, and these so there is a background for how the systematic naming of particularly the collection and the naming and the taxonomy of plants, botany. Eventually, I think you can say that it branches into the botanical survey and also the Indian forestry, because forestry is more of a commercial value and aspect to the East India Company, but the botanical aspect is almost completely dominated by missionaries and people who seek knowledge about everything else. And
Carey brings daisy flowers from England. That's important because for our viewers to know that when God creates Adam and Eve, He gives them a command that you name all the animals.
Exactly.
Now, naming all the animals means that you have to know the difference between a zebra, a horse, a donkey.
Right. Although all of them look similar.
They might first glance look similar, but they eat different things.
Right.
And what they eat grows in different climates and different soils. So to know and name animals, so Adam is naming animals means taxonomy, classifying animals, but that requires knowing the plants, the food. And that requires knowing the soil, the stones. That requires knowing the climate, in which climate what grows. So the command to Adam and Eve to name all the animals, taxonomy, becomes the foundation for science. And this, of course, gets confused through the Middle Ages and all. But after the Reformation, so in Basel, the Huguenots, they begin it, but then it goes to
Linnaeus, right?
Linnaeus is Lutheran, and in Scandinavia, my wife and I were there a few months ago, or 1 or 2 years ago, to see his statue. So it was Linnaeus' system of gardening, which William Carey brings to Sirampur and builds. So Carey actually worked in the Calcutta botanical garden before establishing his own botanical garden in Sirampur. So this was the Bible that is inspiring the European Christian habit of studying every plant and naming it.
Right. And interestingly, Dietrich Brandis, the father of Indian forestry, is also the father of forestry worldwide. He inspires people to, he becomes, one of his disciples become the professor or the founding professor of the first forestry course in England. And eventually, this one of his disciples become the father of the forestry in America. So President Theodore Roosevelt, actually sends him appreciation. Brandis, sent an appreciation for this cause of forestry in the United States because of some of his disciples who trained under him.
Well, that's very interesting because before William Carey established Rampur mission, he had to earn his living. So one of the things he did was the botanical garden in Calcutta. He founded in 1820 the world's first agri-horticultural society.
Wow.
6 months later, Britain established the British Agri-Horticultural Society. So the first Agri-Horticultural Society to promote agriculture, to bring scientific agriculture to India. From here it spread all over the world. So this began in India, but which we have discussed in our book on Carey. But you want to comment on the veterinary and
so
animal husbandry?
Animal husbandry. So this, the East India Company also is interested in horses because horses are you need horses to get over rough terrain, right? Rough terrain in India, and there are no roads, and of course there are plenty of battles, right? And the Aryans bought the horses and the cart. The horse-driven chariot was the Aryans brought this to India, but there was no scientific book written by of all the people, the Aryans, right, the horse people, right? They never wrote a scientific work or something on how to manage or horses, right? But this Shah Jahan's one of Shah Jahan's employees, he wrote he translated Persian a book in that was the first book in India which dealt with trying to care for horses or how to manage horses. So and within no time the British has come here and translate that into English, and it is published in
horse is not a European, North or West European animal,
right? So a treatise on horses of India, and the first there's a book called The Rules for Bad Horsemen, and it is printed in London for several editions, and then it comes to it is translated into, it comes to India, and it gets an Indian reprint. But I think the first and they start a stud farm for horses in Pusa, which is actually North Bihar. So that is actually the eventually
there is a Pusa near Delhi as well.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
This is in North Bihar, in Tirhut in North Bihar, and so 1,300 people were employed in these stud farms because to maintain this huge
breed
horses and caring for them and their diet, and so it starts as a massive enterprise of employment for Indians, right? Because in correspondingly or parallelly in London, the veterinary college in London is established, and this is when this slowly this that was the start or the beginning of establishing the veterinary colleges in India also. So then there's this, as I said, there's a martyr for coal, and then there's a martyr for horses. His name is Moorcroft, and he is unfortunately, he tries to come to India, and he tries to procure horses, pure breed horses from Arabia or some of those Middle Eastern horses. And in this expedition for this quest for horses, he dies somewhere in the border. And so we have this post of this veterinary, first army veterinary surgeon in India. So veterinary science begins as an army discipline, because horses are part of the army, right? So that and then the stud farm, right? And then slowly it morphs into veterinary education, right? By setting up veterinary colleges.
Yes. Well, I had the privilege of serving in Sam Higginbotham University in Allahabad. Sam Higginbotham gave a lecture in Princeton Theological Seminary in 1919 called The Cattle Problem of India. So that was 1919. In 1924, somebody donated money for 2 modern animal husbandry farms, one in Allahabad, one somewhere near Vellore.
Yes. His name is Henry Phipps. Henry Phipps is an American industrialist and philanthropist.
Okay.
So he donated 30,000 pounds for the establishment of the Agricultural Research Institute at Pusa, which is the and actually that is the first. Henry Phipps was, I think, some kind of like a industrial, baron or a real estate investor or baron, and he established through his generous donations the first major agricultural research, and you see a bunch of this start of that is this veterinary stud farm, this horse stud farm, which eventually morphs into that.
I republished Sam Higginbotham's book called The Gospel and the Plow. The Gospel and the Plow.
Yes.
So from 1924 to 1998, in 74 years, India became the world's largest producer of milk because of that one lecture Sam Higginbotham gave, which mobilized the money to improve the breed. But that milk revolution that we call the white revolution came not from cows, it came from buffaloes. Why that, I will discuss it in another podcast. But once India begins to really harness its cow power, India will produce 3 times more milk than it already does, 4 times. But I think because of the shortage of time, if we begin to move to science education, we have not touched engineering. Roorkee Engineering College, which is now Roorkee IIT, is the first engineering college, and I've already done one video on it, which building Ganga Canal, that instead of worshipping Ganga, we should establish our dominion over Ganga and make Ganga Canal. I've done one video on it, but the fact that not one single Hindu ashram, not one Shankaracharya, not one guru established a college to teach science, to study science. How did the scientific education come?
I think it came, I think the first college of science, or the first people who did all these things like botany and veterinary and agriculture, even survey,
soil and stones,
pretty much they were all doctors. So the British Army doctors would come in the ships, right, and they would probably they had plenty of time in their hands, right, and they would, because of their scientific training back in England, they would double up as paleontologists and plant botanists and all these. So the first people who were scientists or who brought science were pretty much doctors, medical doctors, and eventually that some of these first medical colleges was established in Calcutta in 1835, and also the Hindu college, which became the Presidency College, Calcutta. So I think you'll find a lot of
Jabalpur Science College.
Jabalpur Science College also. So Calcutta becomes the seat of the British, and eventually this ecosystem of science and education, there is a number of graduates, particularly of the upper caste Bengal Hindus, and they probably, some of them take after Raja Mohan Roy, the Bengal Renaissance. So a lot of them come out of this of Calcutta, and eventually there is this person called Dr. Mahendra Lal Sirkar. He is actually the graduate of this Bengal Medical College. He is a doctor. Right? That's why I emphasize doctors again. And he is the founder of the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science in 1876. So you see.
And what was the fruit of that?
Fruit of that was it culminated in the first Nobel Prize to India, which is Dr. C.V. Raman. So C.V. Raman is a Tamil Brahmin. He is born in Tamil Nadu, Tanjore, or one of those places, and he spends 15 years in Calcutta, and he works in the laboratory in the laboratory of the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science, and he does most of his research there. And the Raman, it's a famous Raman effect, and is from Calcutta. Basically, he never goes. So this person who has never left India. It's completely Indian, and gets this Nobel Prize right there in 1931. 31. So this is amazing, right? So Calcutta in of course William Carey is near there, and then Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and all this in 130 years, right, or slightly over 130 years, results in the first Nobel Prize.
Actually 130 years, yes. You mentioned Ram Mohan Roy 2-3 times.
Right.
Ram Mohan Roy,
yes,
10 years before Macaulay Minute. So there are a lot of high caste Hindus who speak fluent English, they studied in English, they work in English. They condemn Macaulay for bringing an English education to India. But Macaulay was echoing in many ways Ram Mohan Roy. Ram Mohan Roy, on the 11th of December 1823, and I'm reading from my book, India the Grand Experiment. He wrote a long letter to the British Prime Minister William Pitt. He wrote this letter because the East India Company was already running Banaras Sanskrit College, which is now Sampurnanand University. There's not one single university in India which teaches science in Sanskrit.
Right. Despite claims of Sanskrit being an extremely scientific language.
Yes. So there's still not one single university in India which teaches science in Sanskrit. And the British were planning to start a second Sanskrit college in Calcutta. And Ram Mohan Roy protested. He said, and I quote from him, if he's first talking about England, if it had been intended to keep the British nation in ignorance, this is the last 2 paragraphs of his letter. So if the intention was to keep Britain in ignorance of knowledge, the Baconian, Francis Bacon is the father of modern science, the Baconian philosophy would not have been allowed to displace the medieval education, the system of schoolmen, which was best calculated to perpetuate ignorance. So scholasticism was perpetuating ignorance in Europe. He says, in the same manner, the Sanskrit system of education would be best calculated to keep this country, India, in darkness. So when the British are trying to establish a Sanskrit college, they are simply trying to keep India in darkness. If such had been the policy of the British legislator, But as the improvement of the native population is the object of the British government, East India government, it consequently ought to promote a more liberal and enlightened system of instruction, embracing mathematics, natural philosophy, chemistry, and anatomy with other useful sciences which may be accomplished with the sum purposed by employing a few gentlemen of talent and learning educated in Europe, and providing a college furnished with the necessary books, instruments, and apparatus, so laboratory. In representing this subject to your lordship, I conceive myself discharging a solemn duty which I owe to my countrymen and also to that enlightened sovereign and legislator, that is British Parliament, which have extended their benevolent cares to this distant land, actuated by a desire to improve its inhabitants. And I therefore humbly trust you will excuse the liberty I have taken in thus expressing my sentiments to your lordship. So, the missionary education,
Yes.
and William Pitt is a great friend of the evangelical members of parliament, such as William Wilberforce. Raman Roy is saying that if you want to keep India in darkness, teach Sanskrit. If you want to enlighten India, improve India, and I believe that is the intention of the British government,
Yes.
teach us science, teach us mathematics, bring laboratories here. Now, Ram Mohan Roy is actually echoing what Charles Grant, a member of parliament, friend of William Wilberforce, had already said in 1790 and published in 1792. So this is what Macaulay takes when lots of Hindu gets very upset that Macaulay says that one shelf of British library has more knowledge than all of the Sanskrit literature. This is very humbling, but that is in fact true even today. And but it is not Macaulay. It is Ram Mohan Roy, 10 years before Macaulay, is urging Europe, particularly Britain, to bring scientific education to India. And that's the fruit we are seeing. Right. We obviously need more session on this topic of science, but thank you very much for spending this hour and a half with us in presenting how the Bible's worldview brought modern science to India, which has produced all the scientific technological talent which is blessing the world today. So thank you very much. If you like this conversation, please share this video and please subscribe to our channel so that I can make many more videos. Thank you. God bless you. God bless India.